Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're on a really critical mission, building a personal system for resilience. We're going way beyond just, simple tips. We're really digging into the physical reality of life shocks. Could be small frustrations, big career hits, or even serious trauma. And the goal, to figure out how to actually use those shocks as like fuel for real growth.
Yeah, adversity. It's pretty much guaranteed, isn't it?
Yeah.
But being fragile because of it, that's definitely optional. So we're diving deep into this research stack to understand, well, not just how to get through stress, but how to fundamentally change the way our minds and, yeah, our bodies process it.
Okay, so resilience. The research world looks at it through a few different lenses, right? Before we jump right in, maybe clarify how we're defining it for this deep dive. Because we're not just talking about some fixed personality trait someone might have. We want something practical, something teachable.
That's exactly right. Yeah, traditionally, you see resilience as maybe a stable trait, like you just are resilient, or a dynamic process, how you use resources when things get tough, or even adaptive outcomes like staying healthy even when you're suffering. But our focus here, it's squarely on learned resilience. We're treating it as a skill, something you can measure, something you can learn, and definitely something you need to practice. And that really frames our goal perfectly. We're moving past that old idea of just bouncing back to where you were. We're aiming for what we call building forward. You come out of it stronger with a genuinely higher capacity than when you started.
Building forward, I like that. It shifts the whole thing from just recovery to, well, investment. Okay, let's unpack this journey then. Starting with that immediate gut-level experience of shock. We have to get a handle on the invisible scars first, right? The actual physical impact of emotions, because stress, it starts in the body.
It absolutely does. We really have to start with the acute stress response. It was first called fight or flight, but, well, modern trauma research sees a much broader picture now. We talk about fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, often just grouped under hyperarousal. It's basically our biological system slamming the big red alarm button.
Fight or flight, I think most people get that.
Yeah.
But freeze and fawn, they feel a bit less intuitive maybe, even though they happen all the time.
Yeah.
So how does the body kick off that whole complex chain reaction, like instantaneously?
Oh, it's incredibly fast. It's a deeply wired survival thing from evolution. It all starts in the brain's little alarm center, the amygdala. It spots a threat or what it thinks is a threat. That signal immediately hits the hypothalamus, which is kind of the commander-in-chief. And then the hypothalamus sets off two really powerful systems at the same time. First, it pokes the pituitary gland, which then pumps out this hormone called ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone.
ACTH, so that's the chemical messenger that gets the hormonal stress ball rolling.
Precisely. And the second thing happening in parallel is it activates the sympathetic nervous system, which talks directly to the adrenal glands. And that's where this huge hormonal cascade really kicks off. It's all built for speed.
And that cascade unleashes the chemicals that create that physical shock we feel, right? The catecholamines. What exactly are they doing to us physically, and why is it so important to, wrap our heads around that?
Right. The catecholamines, we're mainly talking adrenaline or epinephrine and norepinephrine. They are pure survival juice. They're engineered to get the body ready for, well, violent, energy-hungry muscle action. Think of it like a car. They just bypass cruising speed and floor it.
Okay, and what does that feel like inside my own body? That pounding heart, the shakes?
You're feeling the system basically rerouting everything to deal with the immediate danger.
So yeah, increased blood pressure, faster heart rate, maximizing cardiac output. Blood flow gets shunted specifically to your big muscles in your brain. You need your arms and legs ready, and your brain needs to process fast. And crucially, blood flow gets cut way back from systems that aren't essential right then, like digestion. That's why your stomach might churn, or you just completely lose your appetite when you're really stressed.
The body's choosing survival over lunch. Makes sense.
Exactly. And to fuel all this, your liver dumps extra glucose and fats into your bloodstream. Instant high-energy fuel. Your breathing speeds up to get more oxygen in to burn that fuel. Even your blood clotting gets faster, which is a bit grim, but it's adaptive, preparing for potential injury. And that muscle tension, feeling all wound up, that's your body priming itself for action. If it goes on too long, it turns into trembling or shaking.
Wow. That's a really vivid, almost scary picture of being thrown way outside your comfort zone. So to stabilize, we need some kind of map for this state. Which brings us to the window of tolerance. Yes, this is a really foundational concept. The window of tolerance, it describes that zone of, let's say, optimal arousal, our psychological green zone or safe zone. When you're operating inside this window, you feel grounded, you're present, you're flexible. And you can actually use your prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of the brain, for conscious choices, clear thought, planning, regulating emotions.
But that stress response we just described, it throws us violently out of that window, either way too high or way too low.
Correct, yeah. When that acute stress response is fully fired up, it pushes the system into hyperarousal. That's the fight-flight zone. Think anxiety, panic, anger, being hyper-alert, feeling totally overwhelmed, the energy is just too high. But conversely, if the system decides the threat is, like, too big or there's no escape, it can collapse into hyperarousal. That's the freeze, fawn, submit zone. It looks more like numbness, brain fog, depression, feeling disconnected, shutting down emotionally. It's sort of an involuntary playing dead to signal submission or maybe just avoid pain.
Like the nervous system just hitting the off switch. Okay, what's the really crucial takeaway here about how long these states last? Because getting back into the green zone rarely seems as fast as falling out of it.
That's the absolute core difficulty in trying to self-stabilize. The nervous system goes into those stress states incredibly quickly, but it comes out slowly.
Yeah.
You can hit panic mode in milliseconds, but climbing back into that window of tolerance, that takes real, dedicated effort. So the goal of stabilization, it's really twofold. One, reduce that extreme sympathetic energy, and two, at the same time, strengthen the ventral system, that system associated with feeling safe, connected, socially engaged, the part that tells the brain the danger's past.
Okay, so if the body is the accelerator, the mind needs to be the steering wheel, and maybe the brakes too. Which brings us to the idea of an internal compass. How do we anchor ourselves mentally when things get turbulent? Because often when people talk resilience, they mean just pure willpower, grit. But we're looking at something more strategic here.
Yeah, grit's important, definitely necessary, but it's not the whole picture. Learned resilience is strategic. Grit is about pushing through hardship with sheer determination. Learned resilience asks, okay, how can I use this hardship to actually increase my baseline capacity? It's intentional, it's proactive. The goal, explicitly, is to build forward, not bounce back.
And the most immediate, maybe the most critical anchor for that is accurate thinking.
Absolutely. Accurate thinking just means objectivity. It means grounding your understanding of what's happening in facts, in evidence,
Yeah.
rather than just the raw, unfiltered feed from your emotions. When we let that hyper-aroused state, what some call the emotion mind, take the wheel, we tend to spiral into catastrophic thinking, confusing a possibility with a probability, or thinking a feeling is a fact. Cultivating that objectivity, it directly leads to better decisions, which in turn helps us reach goals, maintain stronger relationships, because we're responding to what's actually happening, not just reacting.
And this feeds straight into what I find one of the most fascinating parts of resilience research, learned optimism. We often kind of dismiss optimism as just, looking on the bright side, maybe even naive. But the research paints it as a really disciplined internal storytelling strategy.
It's entirely about your explanatory style, specifically how you explain bad events to yourself. Real optimism, learned optimism, it acknowledges the pain, the disappointment. It's not about denial. But it consistently frames setbacks as specific, temporary, and often externally influenced obstacles that can be overcome. The resilient person's explanatory style uses three key shifts, often called the 3 Ps, to kind of shield the self from lasting damage.
Okay, let's break down those 3 Ps, maybe with some clear contrasting examples, starting with how we perceive permanence.
Right, permanence is about time. The pessimist tends to see bad events as permanent. I bombed that presentation. I'm always going to be awful at public speaking. See, that one failure is now like etched in stone, defining the future. The optimist sees bad events as temporary. Okay, I bombed that presentation because I wasn't prepared enough this time. I'll do better next time.
Yeah, right.
The failure is tied to the specific event, not the person's identity. So they bounce back faster because the setback doesn't define everything going forward.
And that pessimistic view can easily become a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Why even try if you believe you're permanently bad at something? Okay, the next P is pervasiveness. This one's about scope.
Exactly. Pervasiveness is about whether you let helplessness in one area bleed into everything else. Compartmentalization. So if a pessimistic person gets rejected for a job, they might think, nobody will ever hire me. My whole career is over. The failure just contaminates their entire sense of self, their whole future. The optimistic response, it compartmentalizes. Okay, they didn't hire me for that specific role today, but I'm still a capable professional. This stops one setback, a relationship ending, a project failing from poisoning every other part of life.
Okay, now, here's a critical point, though. Externalizing blame, which sounds a bit like what the optimist is doing. Doesn't that sometimes just look like denial? I mean, if I mess up, shouldn't I take responsibility?
That's a great challenge, a really important one. And the answer, I think, lies in the third P, personalization. It's not about denying responsibility for your part in a failure. It's about accurately figuring out the root cause. The resilient person tends to attribute bad events more to external causes that are potentially changeable. Market conditions were tough for that project, or the economy is rough right now if they get laid off. While attributing positive events to internal stable qualities, I succeeded because I worked hard, or I'm smart.
Ah, okay. So the optimist internalizes the good stuff, externalizes the bad stuff, while the pessimist does the reverse.
Exactly. The pessimist internalizes the bad. I got laid off because I'm a terrible employee, which just tanks their confidence and motivation. The optimist externalizes the bad, but crucially, still takes action to try and change the external situation. They maintain their confidence, their self-belief, while still acknowledging that, yeah, external factors exist and matter. It's a strategic explanation that protects your core self-worth and keeps you motivated to try again.
That really reframes the self as the reliable source of good outcomes and external factors as the obstacles to navigate.
Okay, moving deeper now, motivation-wise. Our sources really emphasize that fulfillment often comes from engaging with challenges, not trying to dodge them.
Yeah, and this connects that strategic thinking we just discussed to our really deep human needs. The drive for resilience seems to boil down to two core imperatives: survival, just basic physical, emotional, social continuity, and byway, meaning having a life that feels worth sustaining, worth fighting for. When you can align your day-to-day actions with a core sense of purpose, that purpose becomes an anchor. So when the storm hits, the job vanishes, the relationship ends your core values, the why behind what you do, they provide clarity, they provide intrinsic motivation, they act like a guide when everything else feels chaotic.
And having that powerful internal direction actually changes how we view stress itself, doesn't it?
Mm.
The stress mindset shift. The research here is, well, it's pretty compelling. Your belief about stress changes your biology. It really does. It fundamentally changes things like cortisol patterns, immune function, even how fast you recover physiologically. If you operate with a stress is harmful mindset, you see those bodily responses, the racing heart, the adrenaline, as signs of weakness, signs you're about to fail. And that often leads to pulling back, ruminating, and it just reinforces the belief, see, I can't handle adversity, which frankly is the fast lane to learned helplessness.
But if we consciously try to flip that script,
Then the stresses-enhancing mindset sees those exact same physical sensations as vital energy, as your body getting ready for peak performance. It fuels engagement. It promotes problem solving. It reinforces the belief, I can adapt, I can thrive. The stress itself gets transformed from an enemy into a signal for growth. And research shows people with this mindset literally perform better under pressure and recover faster.
okay, so the actionable steps here are really key. How do you actually make that shift when your sympathetic system is screaming danger?
It takes a conscious three-part mental intervention, really. First, just acknowledge the stress. Okay, I feel pressure, without judging it as inherently bad. Second, consciously reframe it. This pressure is energy. My body is gearing up to meet this challenge. And third, this is the most powerful part. Link it directly to what matters most to you. I'm using this energy to protect my family, or to finish this project that means something, or to stand up for my value of integrity. That connection to purpose, it changes the biological outcome.
That's how we anchor the mind. Okay, let's pivot now to the immediate hands-on tools, the shock absorbers, the things that help us manage the physical fallout when that hyperarousal really hits. We need a solid set of psychological buffers.
Right. We can start by thinking about two main categories of proactive coping: problem-focused and emotion-focused. Just figuring out which category fits the situation is often the first act of stabilizing yourself.
How do you tell? How do you know if you need to change the situation itself or if you need to change how you feel about it?
Good question. Problem-focused coping is what you use when the situation can be changed. It requires taking action on the external world. So things like setting clear boundaries with someone, making a detailed to-do list to tackle overwhelm, creating a budget if money's the stressor, or sometimes initiating a difficult but necessary change, like ending an unhealthy relationship.
Okay. And emotion-focused coping.
That comes into play when the circumstances are, well, basically fixed, or at least out of your immediate control. If you can't fix the situation itself, like you're grieving a major loss or dealing with something huge like an economic downturn, you have to manage your internal response. This is where you use self-soothing skills. Maybe seek social support just for comfort, not solutions, or practice genuinely accepting what you can't change. And there's a third category too, proactive coping. That's about planning ahead for known stressors, like maybe anticipating holiday stress if you're trying to maintain weight loss and having a plan ready.
Before we get to the real crisis tools, let's quickly touch on the traps. The unhealthy coping mechanisms. The ones that offer quick relief but really cost us in the long run.
Oh yeah, these are insidious because they hijack the system. The danger is they feel like they work in the moment, which reinforces the bad habit. Probably the most common trap is using substances, alcohol, drugs. They definitely numb emotional pain, give you that feeling of escape, but they solve absolutely nothing. They prevent healthy processing and obviously carry huge health and addiction risks. Alcohol is especially tricky because it's a depressant. So often, after the temporary buzz fades, it actually increases your baseline anxiety and depression.
What about other common avoidance tactics people lean on?
Well, we definitely see manipulating food, either overeating to kind of stuff down feelings or restricting to get a false sense of control. Both harm you physically and mentally. Sleeping too much, kind of like hibernation, is another temporary escape. But the problem's still there, often bigger when you wake up. And chronic oversleeping messes up healthy sleep cycles.
And what about social habits that might seem helpful on the surface, like just constantly venting?
Right? Seeking support is definitely healthy. But research shows that chronic, repetitive venting, just telling the same painful story over and over without looking for solutions, it actually keeps those rumination circuits firing in your brain. It kind of traps you in the pain state. It feels like connection, maybe, but it often just reinforces a victim narrative. And finally, even seemingly harmless things like constantly socializing or binge-watching shows can become unhealthy coping. If you're using them only to avoid tackling a known core problem, like, filing your taxes or making that difficult phone call you've been putting off.
Okay. Now let's talk true crisis mode. When the system is spinning way out of that window of tolerance, we need immediate, hard stops. This is where crisis survival skills come in, often drawing from DBT, dialectical behavior therapy.
Exactly. These skills have one main job. Help you survive a really intense situation without acting on harmful urges or making things drastically worse. It's about tolerating the distress, just getting through it. The core philosophy of DBT is that dialectic, right? Holding two seemingly opposite truths at once, like, I accept myself in my current situation exactly as it is right now, and at the same time, I must change and work hard to improve things.
That balanced radical acceptance plus passionate effort seems crucial when you're staring down some overwhelming urge. How does that technique, evaluating urges using pros and cons, help right in that moment of intense pressure?
Well, this is actually something you do before the crisis hits, ideally. Before that overwhelming urge takes over, maybe an urge towards self-harm or risky behavior, whatever it is for you, you sit down and write out two detailed lists. First, the pros and cons of acting on that specific urge. Second, the pros and cons of resisting the urge and tolerating the distress. And the key is you review this list when the urge actually strikes. The goal is to insert a moment of conscious thought before the automatic reaction kicks in, to force yourself to ask, okay, what do I really want here? The quick, temporary relief of maybe a good few moments, or the long-term integrity of a good life?
That framing uses the thinking brain just long enough to hopefully interrupt that primitive impulse. Okay, beyond that cognitive check, we also have the physical regulation skills, the ones that use the body itself to slam on the physiological brakes.
Right, these are often called the T.I.P.P skills.
Yes.
This is for temperature, I for intense exercise, and P for paced breathing or paired muscle relaxation. The whole idea is to use your body to rapidly change your internal chemistry.
Let's start with the most dramatic one, maybe. Temperature change, especially cold water.
Yeah, this technique works by activating something called the mammalian dive reflex. It's pretty amazing. When you put your full face into very cold water, ideally under 60 degrees Fahrenheit or so, or even just hold a cold pack firmly over your eyes and upper cheeks while holding your breath, it sends this powerful, ancient signal to your brain that you're diving underwater. And that immediately triggers a profound physiological shift. It rapidly slows your heart rate way down and redirects blood flow away from your limbs. It's basically a natural brake on the sympathetic nervous system.
Wow, using a primal mechanism to calm the modern nervous system. That's fascinating, but we absolutely have to include the health caution here.
Oh, absolutely critical. Cold water immersion significantly slows the heart rate. So if you have any pre-existing heart condition, any medical issues, if you naturally have a low heart rate because of medication, or if you're on beta blockers, you must talk to your doctor before trying this skill. Seriously. Also, obviously, avoid ice water if you have a cold allergy or something like Raynaud's phenomenon.
Got it. Okay, and the eye intense exercise, that also changes the chemistry pretty dramatically.
Yes, intense exercise is specifically aimed at burning off all that excess adrenaline and cortisol that's flooding your system during fight or flight. So if you feel that intense rage or extreme anxiety building, doing some really high-intensity exercise like sprinting, burpees, maybe really heavy yard work for just 10 or 15 minutes, it can physically metabolize those stress chemicals. It helps your body come back down to baseline more naturally.
And finally, the P. Paced breathing and paired muscle relaxation.
Right. Paced breathing is probably one of the most accessible tools anywhere, anytime. You're just aiming to slow your breathing down to maybe 5 or 6 breaths per minute. A really effective way is to inhale for about 4 or 5 seconds and then make your exhale noticeably longer, maybe 6 or 7 seconds. That longer exhale directly stimulates the vagus nerve, which activates the parasympathetic system, the rest and digest system. And with paired muscle relaxation, you systematically tense up a muscle group really hard while you breathe in, hold it for a moment, and then as you breathe out, you completely release the tension, maybe saying the word relax silently in your mind. This helps your brain connect the conscious thought relax with the actual physical feeling of release.
Okay, so moving on from those immediate crisis tactics, let's focus on more general stabilization and grounding techniques. These are skills really essential for pulling us out of rumination, back into the present moment. This is getting into somatics, right?
Exactly. Somatic approaches really get that resilience is fundamentally physical. Remember we said earlier, something like 80% of the messages go from the body to the brain, and only about 20% go the other way. That means regulating your body is often the fastest, most reliable way to turn down the brain's danger alarms, create some space from those overwhelming mental stories, and also access those deeper implicit memories of feeling safe.
So step one is actually listening to that 80%.
Step one is the autonomic check-in. Just pausing to identify your current dominant nervous system state. Am I in ventral, feeling safe, connected? Am I in sympathetic fight or flight? Or am I in dorsal, that shutdown state? And you figure this out not by thinking about it, but by noticing physical sensations. Tension, temperature, heart rate, how easily you can move. Are my shoulders up by my ears? Is my skin clammy? Is my breathing really shallow? Your body gives you feedback your emotional mind might try to hide.
Okay, so once we identify we're in hyper or hypoarousal, we need ways to anchor ourselves back to the here and now.
Right. And that's where grounding and stabilization techniques come in. They work by forcing a shift in your focus. The 5-4-3-2-1 technique is super effective because it makes you sequentially engage all 5 of your senses. It just floods your system with objective, present moment sensory data.
Forcing the brain to stop replaying the past or worrying about the future.
Exactly. You just systematically name 5 things you can see right now, really notice them. 4 things you can hear, maybe identifying the source of each sound. 3 things you can feel through touch, the texture of your clothes, the pressure of the chair beneath you. 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. It really does short-circuit that cognitive looping by demanding your sensory attention instead.
And there are other techniques, too, that focus just specifically on the body's presence.
Absolutely. Grounding with the body can be as simple as focusing on points of contact. Feeling the weight of your body in the chair, noticing the solid connection of both feet on the floor.
Right.
Maybe pressing your hands together firmly. You can also tune into internal sensations. Where exactly does that tension start in my shoulder? Where does it end? And of course, mastering diaphragm breathing, that comfortable deep belly breathing, imagining a balloon gently inflating and deflating in your stomach, that's really foundational for regulating the pace of your whole system.
Our sources also give this really rich, detailed toolkit of specific sensory distractions for self-soothing, right? For when we just need to tolerate high distress.
Yeah, these are often the softer skills, but they make a huge difference in just making life tolerable sometimes. For vision, you could try looking closely at intricate patterns, like wood grain or a leaf, really studying a piece of art, mindfully observing nature out the window, or just watching a complex visual scene without judgment. For hearing, maybe listening to complex instrumental music, or soothing sounds like white noise, or focusing on the detailed sounds of nature like individual raindrops or leaves rustling. The brain stays engaged but calms down.
What about smell and taste? Those seem particularly powerful for regulation.
Oh, smell is profoundly linked to memory and the limbic system, our emotional brain. So yeah, you could boil some cinnamon sticks, light a specific scented candle you like, maybe avoiding strong perfumes if you're sensitive, or just mindfully breathe in the scent of fresh air outside, maybe in a park. For taste, the key is mindful engagement, not just scarfing something down, slowly savoring a favorite food or drink herbal tea, hot chocolate, or even the sharp focus of sucking on a strong peppermint or chewing flavorful gum. The point isn't consumption, it's focused sensory absorption.
And finally, touch, which seems so fundamental for regulation.
Touch can be incredibly grounding and regulating because it's so immediate. It could be taking a long hot bath or shower, putting on really soft, comfortable clothes, using a weighted blanket, petting a cat or dog. That rhythmic motion is very soothing. Or even the sharp intensity of holding an ice cube or putting a cold compress on your face or neck. Even just sinking into a really comfortable chair and consciously feeling the chair support your full weight. That's a form of self-soothing and grounding. The big takeaway for all these sensory tools is repetition. You have to practice them when you're calm so they become automatic when you actually need them in distress.
Okay, we've built up the immediate shock absorbers. Now let's zoom out again to the longer game. This idea of the rebound effect, or what the research calls post-traumatic growth. This is about moving beyond just surviving towards actually thriving. We need to really clearly distinguish resilience from growth here because they get mixed up a lot.
Yeah, this is crucial. This is where we shift from just managing the chaos to actually using the chaos. So resilience is the process of adapting well. It's the capacity to endure the pain, to keep showing up day after day despite tragedy, maybe maintain basic functioning when things are awful. You could say resilience is like the engine still running, maybe just on fumes, but running. Post-traumatic growth, or PTG, that's the positive changes, the thriving that people experience as a result of grappling with that painful adversity. PTG is the outcome that can make the struggle feel meaningful in retrospect.
Can you give us maybe a detailed example that really illustrates that shift from just resilience to actual growth?
Sure, let's imagine someone loses their job unexpectedly. A big shock. Their initial resilience might look like this. They're struggling, maybe paying bills late, but they're paying them. They force themselves to go to networking events even when they feel awful. They keep up their exercise routine. They're enduring the pain and uncertainty, functioning despite it. That's resilience. Now, the post-traumatic growth, that might emerge, say, 2 years later. They look back and realize that job they lost. It was actually kind of toxic, a bad fit, but they were too scared to leave voluntarily. Having been forced out, they had to pivot. Maybe they started their own small consulting business, doing work that's perfectly aligned with their real values and skills. The job loss became the catalyst for discovering a deeper sense of purpose, maybe more confidence. That higher baseline of well-being and competence they have now, that's the PTG.
Okay, so what does that thriving actually look like in concrete terms? The research points to 5 specific areas where adversity can force positive change.
Right? These are like the hallmarks that someone has truly built forward. First, finding new possibilities. Old doors closed, forcing them to find new paths, maybe discovering a new life purpose or developing entirely new interests they never would have explored otherwise. Second, a change in relationships. Adversity often clarifies who your real support system is. It can lead to increased closeness with some people, deeper empathy overall, maybe more courage to trust others because you've experienced shared vulnerability.
Yeah, that knowledge that you don't have to face the really big stuff completely alone must be incredibly strengthening.
Absolutely. The third area is an increased sense of strength. This is that deep internal realization, wow, I survived that. I guess I can handle pretty much anything. It gives you this profound, almost nonverbal sense of vitality and self-worth that's forged in the fire, not just handed to you by praise. Fourth, growth can show up as a spiritual change, maybe a deepened faith, or perhaps a significantly altered philosophy about life, meaning, and purpose.
And the 5th area, appreciation.
A greater appreciation for life, often for the small things. Surviving a major shock can really put everyday frustrations into perspective. People often report enjoying life more intensely afterwards, maybe interacting more widely with people because some internal barriers came down during the struggle.
Which brings us right back to that core philosophy of learned resilience, the whole build forward concept. It's not just about getting through one tough event. It's about systematically turning that event into an investment in your future capacity.
And the growth has to be incremental, right? Based on tackling those right-sized challenges, followed by reflection, and importantly, recovery.
There's a really powerful insight here, too. Professionally, we often learn what patterns to repeat from our successes. But personally, we often learn the most profound, lasting wisdom from our failures, from the struggle itself. It's that wrestling match, that discomfort, that truly forges character, real confidence, and lasting self-esteem. Okay, so how do we operationalize all of this? The mindset shifts, the regulation tools, the growth philosophy into one single, repeatable, actionable framework. We have this 6-step process the learned resilience loop, which you describe as an engine for neuroplasticity.
Yeah, this loop is designed to be a systematic way to metabolize adversity into growth. It's summarized by the acronym THRIE. It intentionally builds capacity by taking on small, manageable challenges, followed by critical learning and deep recovery.
Okay, let's walk through those steps in detail, starting with T, take on.
Take on. This means consciously identifying a right-sized challenge. It has to be something that stretches your current ability, difficult, yes, but still feels possible. If the challenge is way too big, you risk collapsing back into helplessness. If it's too easy, you don't really learn or grow. So this requires some honest self-assessment to find that sweet spot of manageable discomfort.
Got it. Next up, HA, hypothesize.
Hypothesize. This is the crucial pause and reflection moment. You stop any automatic negative thoughts and consciously decide on one atomic, tiny, incremental step you can take towards resolving the challenge. Like, what is the single smallest action I can take right now that moves the needle even slightly? This is where that objective, accurate thinking gets translated into a concrete plan.
Then we actually do it. R for reach.
Reach. Now, you take that atomic step, but you do it with passion, with vigor, with full emotional commitment. The effort needs to be sustained, intentional. It's not just about ticking a box. It's about doing it with enthusiasm, because that reinforces the identity. I'm someone who commits and follows through. That commitment builds momentum.
Okay, after the action, we pause again and evaluate. Up for inspect.
Inspect. Now you look at the outcome objectively. Was my hypothesis correct? What part worked? What didn't? This is where the real learning starts to happen. And importantly, when you successfully complete that action step, your brain releases dopamine. That reinforces the positive link between facing the challenge and feeling good about the effort.
Yeah.
You have to consciously notice and register that success, however small.
And V for value, the deep learning phase. This sounds like more than just noting the result. It's analyzing why it happened.
Exactly. V value. You analyze and learn, turning that raw information into actual wisdom. This is where you might use a technique like the 5 whys, asking why 5 times to drill down to the root cause of why something succeeded or failed. Like, why did I fail that step? Because I rushed. Why did I rush? Because I was late starting. Why was I late? Because I didn't budget enough prep time. This deep reflection makes sure the experience becomes useful wisdom for the next time, not just forgotten noise.
And finally, the crucial step we often skip, rest and reset. E for energize.
Energize.
Yes.
You have to regulate the nervous system, recover, refuel. This is the essential recovery phase. It involves actively applying those sensory soothing and grounding techniques we talked about earlier. You need to consciously breathe, rest, maybe replenish energy, and prepare yourself to re-enter the loop for the next challenge. We often treat recovery as passive downtime, but in this model, recovery is an active, vital part of the growth cycle. It ensures you come back stronger.
So this whole THRVE process, it really boils down to a choice point we face constantly at every moment of difficulty. You frame this using that timeless metaphor of the wolves within.
Yeah, it's a powerful way to think about it. We face this continuous choice. We can choose to feed the black wolf, the one representing fear, avoidance, negative rumination. That leads towards learned helplessness. Or we can choose to feed the white wolf, representing courage, peace, growth, action. That leads towards learned resilience. Every single deliberate step you take within that resilience loop, deciding to take on a challenge, actively questioning a negative thought, choosing a longer exhale, every one of those actions reinforces the positive wolf. And it weakens the voice of that internal saboteur that's always whispering, it's too hard, it's not worth the effort.
So the final actionable step for you, the listener, today is really to start customizing that personal resilience toolkit and, crucially, getting the reps in.
Precisely. You need to first become aware of your default stress mindset and commit to actively training it towards stresses enhancing. Start tracking your own nervous system states using that autonomic check-in. Just notice where you are throughout the day. Begin practicing your personalized stabilization and grounding skills. Figure out what works best for you. Is it the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1? Is it paced breathing? Is it purposeful, intense exercise? Track which skills actually help your body shift states. Because resilience isn't something you're just born with. It's absolutely a capacity you build through persistent, intentional practice, engaging with that manageable discomfort.
We've covered a lot of ground today in this deep dive. We went from the microscopic, that hormonal cascade of the stress response, all the way through the power of accurate thinking, physiological regulation, and finally landing on a framework for post-traumatic growth. We've really established learned resilience as this repeatable method for intentionally building your capacity.
Yeah, the ultimate goal isn't just to endure your life, right? It's to make sure your survival is fueled by meaning and purpose, and to learn how to leverage every challenge, big or small, as a genuine opportunity to build forward.
And as we wrap up, we've talked a lot about how learned resilience is forged internally through practice. But the sources also make it really clear that this skill is profoundly relational. It's cultivated, it's strengthened in community with others. We learned about the power, the importance of the other voice, that mentor, coach, friend, peer who steps in when your own belief starts to waver, someone who can help reframe the stress, maybe model the resilience you're trying to build.
Right. So if resilience is indeed a skill, and if that skill gets exponentially stronger when it's modeled and reinforced by the people around us,
Yeah.
then the final question we want to leave you with, the listener, is this. Who will you choose to be the other voice for in their journey of growth? And in doing that, how might you yourself exponentially increase your own capacity to thrive?
A really powerful thought to carry forward as you start building your own resilient blueprint. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the resilient mind.